gather around the campfire and let me tell you a story. Today we're going to be talking about the urban legend of poisoned Halloween candy. Should you be dumping your kids' Snickers and Smarties when they come home? Was your parents taking your pillowcases to be sifted through by police or x-rayed by a hospital really necessary? How did Americans become convinced that there might be razor blades or arsenic in their Hershey bars? And is there any truth to this lasting legend of real horror hiding at the bottom of your plastic pumpkin buckets? By far the most notorious case of Halloween candy tampering is the case of the man who killed Halloween. Ronald Clark O'Bryan was born on October 19, 1944. He married a woman whose name I don't know how to pronounce, but I'm going to go with Daneen. And they had two children, Timothy and Elizabeth, 1966 and 1969. The family lived in Deer Park, Texas, where Ronald worked as an optician and a Baptist deacon. He also sang in the church choir, which I also did, so we're not all murderers, and he ran the town's bus program. Everything seemed to be normal with the family until Halloween night, 1974. O'Bryan took 8-year-old Timothy and 5-year-old Elizabeth trick-or-treating with some neighbors after a group dinner. At one point in the night, they came to a house that didn't answer the door. The kids ran ahead while O'Bryan lagged behind. When he returned, he told his kids that the house had actually opened up and had given him 5 giant pixie sticks, which, for those who don't know, are giant plastic tubes of sugar. He gave 1 to each of his kids, 1 to 2 neighbors' kids, and 1 more to a boy he recognized from his church. When they went to the neighbor's house after trick-or-treating, O'Bryan, quote, leaped over the table, unquote, to stop a friend's child from eating Timothy's pixie stick. When the family returned home, O'Bryan offered Timothy the pixie stick and helped him open it because it was oddly sealed with a staple. Timothy complained about the bitter taste immediately and drank some Kool-Aid to wash it down, but he almost instantly started to vomit and convulse. He died on the way to the hospital, and the community went into a panic. Families dumped their kids' candy by the pillowcase at the police station. Timothy's family wasn't initially considered suspicious until potassium cyanide was found in his system after the coroner smelled the telltale scent of almonds that comes from the poison. The authorities tracked down 3 of the 4 uneaten pixie sticks, but a newspaper describes what happened when they called the final family as, quote, when police got to Whitney Parker's house, his parents almost died on the spot because they couldn't find the pixie stick. They found him holding it asleep. His little fingers were not strong enough to get the staples out. It just sends shivers down your spine, unquote. Each of the pixie sticks had 2 inches replaced with cyanide and could kill 2 to 4 adults. Police decided to question O'Bryan about the deadly Halloween night. He told authorities he couldn't remember which house the pixie sticks came from, but the O'Bryans had only been to 2 streets before they stopped trick-or-treating because of rain, and none of those houses were giving out pixie sticks that night. Police forced O'Bryan to show them which house had reportedly cracked open the door, stuck out a hairy arm, and handed him the candy. When the police looked into who owned the house that he identified, they found out it wasn't a Halloween hater hiding from the neighborhood children with the lights off, but an air traffic controller named Courtney Melvin. There were almost 200 witnesses who confirmed that he was at the airport until late into Halloween night. The police were now highly suspicious of O'Bryan, but were still looking for a motive for him to murder his own son. But as they dug deeper into his financial situation, the clues came together. O'Bryan had held 21 jobs in the past 10 years, and he was today's equivalent of $520,000 in debt. He was on the verge of losing his car, his house, and his job as an optician, where he was suspected of stealing. Perhaps the most damning evidence was that O'Bryan had taken out today's equivalent of over $50,000 in life insurance on both of his children in January of that year, and an extra $20,000 policy on both just days before Halloween. The morning of November 1st, he called an insurance company about collecting the payment for Timothy's life. He had also gone to a chemical supply store and asked about buying cyanide, but was told the smallest amount available was 5 pounds, and he left. They never found out where he did acquire the cyanide that he actually used for the crime. but police did find O'Brien's pocket knife with traces of sugar and plastic packaging in his home. So honestly, this man couldn't have been more suspicious. O'Brien was arrested on November 5th and charged with 1 count of murder and 4 counts of attempted murder, to which he shockingly pled not guilty. His trial began in May of that same year, and unluckily for O'Brien, a parade of his friends, co-workers, a chemist, a chemical salesperson, all testified that he had been asking questions about cyanide, how much would be needed to kill someone, and where to buy it, for years leading up to Timothy's death. To which I'd like to add, if your friend is asking a lot of questions about poison, and they're not an author, chemist, police officer, exterminator, or podcast host, maybe give the police a quick call. O'Brien's sister-in-law and brother-in-law both testified that O'Brien had talked to them at Timothy's funeral about how he was going to take a vacation with the life insurance money. His wife Daneen testified against him as well. The prosecutor, Assistant DA Mike Hinton, said, quote, "We were all shocked that someone would kill their own son, their own flesh and blood, for a lousy $40,000 life insurance policy," unquote. The Candyman, as O'Brien came to be called, used the urban legend of the crazy stranger slipping razor blades and deadly substances into candy as his defense. But the jury was unconvinced, taking only 46 minutes to find him guilty and just over an hour to sentence him to death. Welcome to Texas. After his conviction, his wife divorced him and remarried, and her second husband adopted surviving daughter Elizabeth. She maintained that she had no knowledge of the life insurance policies against her children and never cashed them, calling it blood money. Prosecutor Hinton said of O'Brien, "This is the man who killed Halloween." As O'Brien awaited his execution in prison, he was described as absolutely friendless by the prison chaplain. His fellow inmates hated him so much for killing a child that they actually tried to hold a demonstration against him on the day of his execution. O'Brien's execution date was rescheduled 3 times until the 8th anniversary of the crime, Halloween 1982, when the judge was apparently so fed up with the delays that he said he would drive O'Brien to the death chamber himself. O'Brien attempted to appeal a 4th time, but it was rejected. On March 31st, 1984, O'Brien was executed by lethal injection just after midnight. He left his belongings to a fellow death row inmate accused of killing his own mother, and O'Brien offered his eyes for scientific research or donation. He maintained his innocence until his death, but this didn't stop over 300 people from waiting outside the prison for the news, throwing candy at anti-death penalty protesters. When it was announced that O'Brien was finally gone, the waiting crowd had a morbid chant to shout out, "Trick or treat." So, should you be scared of Halloween candy? Despite these several scary incidents, the research says no. Joel Best, that candy legend expert from earlier, said, quote, "I've done the research, and I can't find any evidence that any child has been killed or seriously hurt by any candy picked up in the course of trick-or-treating. My view is this is overblown. You can't prove a negative, but it seems unlikely," unquote. Best also found about 2 cases a year of sharp objects in candy being reported, but up to 95% were hoaxes. None of them have been deadly, with the most severe injury being a dozen stitches. Why does Best believe this rumor holds on? He said, quote, "We live in a world of apocalyptic scenarios. Here we are. We have safer, healthier, longer lives than people in any other point in history. And we're constantly imagining that this could all fall apart in a nanosecond. So I think that what happens is we translate a lot of our anxiety into fears about our children," unquote. He also offered this comfort to parents, quote, "It's the greatest thing in the world you can be afraid of, because you only have to be afraid of it for 1 night a year. You know, maybe there's somebody down the block who's so crazy that he poisons little children at random, but he only does it 1 night a year. Throughout the rest of the year, he's normal," unquote. If you really want to be safe on Halloween, officials recommend being extra careful of any passing cars. If you're driving, keeping it slow on residential streets, staying visible with flashlights in groups, And if you're still concerned about that candy, make sure the packaging is sealed and not punctured or torn. Throw in any handmade goodies and also the floss because nobody wants that. And if you're listening to this in 2020, wear a mask. And try to keep the kids to a couple handfuls of candy the night of, because the biggest Halloween threat is likely a stomachache.